Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is a show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you have better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at Twit TV.
This is Twit.
So I'm reading this Chromium blog posting titled Faster and More Efficient Phishing Detection in M92, which is the just released version of Chrome. Because that sounds like a good thing. And depending upon what the posting's details revealed, I figured that it might be of interest to our listeners. You're hearing about it, of course, because that did turn out to be the case, though perhaps not for the reason you might imagine. The posting starts out with a little introductory marketing spiel. They said, keeping Chrome users safe as they browse the web is crucially important to Chrome. In fact, security has always been one of our 4 corner principles. And then I, of course, was wondering what the other 3 were. But anyway, in some cases, security can come at the expense of performance. In this case, and of course, they named their series The Fast and the Curious.
Oh, God.
I know. We are excited to share how improvements to our phishing detection algorithms keeps users safe online. With these improvements, phishing detection is now 50, and it turns out it's actually a statistical spread, but we'll get there in a second, 50 times faster. It should say as much as 50 times faster and drains less battery. Then under the subheading of phishing detection, they write, and they begin to explain this, and this is what I had to do a double take. Every time you navigate to a new page, Chrome evaluates a collection of signals about the page to see if it matches those of phishing sites. Okay? To do that, we compare the color profile of the visited page.
What?
I know. That's the range and frequency of colors present on the page.
What does that have to do with phishing?
Exactly. It's nuts. With the color profiles of common pages. For example, in the image below, we can see that the colors are mostly orange, followed by green, and then a touch of purple. Now, in the show notes, I have that captured. Of course, those listening cannot see the diagram, which I've included in the show notes, but it's a page with a bunch of orange pumpkins, so that orange dominates the page, though they are all in light blue frames that actually has more surface area. For some reason, in their example, they're ignoring the light blue. Okay, maybe they actually do ignore the background. I don't know. Actually, later on, it looks like they don't. But they also pick up on one of the frames, which has a green background. But in any event, this says that to detect phishing, they're looking at a page's color distribution. So my first thought was like yours, Leo. What?
What? Why? Yeah.
They're comparing the color profile of a page we visit to the color profiles of common pages. Really? Turns out, yes, they are. That's what Chrome does. Then it hit me. Whatever they do to pull off this detection needs to be done entirely on the client.
Right.
Right? Chrome cannot be sending all visited page URLs back to the Google mothership. That would be a privacy catastrophe. Okay, now, and we'll ignore for the time being that loading our web pages down full of image beacon pixels and JavaScript is essentially doing exactly that. But okay, not formally. And then they confirm the nature of the strategy by explaining, if the site matches a known phishing site, Chrome warns you to protect your personal information and prevent you from exposing your credentials. To preserve your privacy, by default, Chrome's safe browsing mode never sends any images outside the browser. While this is great for privacy, it means that your machine has to do all the work to analyze the image. Okay, so then what follows I've lightly edited to clarify what they're saying without the use of any graphics. So they essentially wrote, image processing can generate heavy workloads because analyzing the image requires an evaluation of each pixel in what is commonly known as a pixel loop. Some modern monitors display upwards of 14 million pixels. So even simple operations on each of those pixels can add up to a lot of CPU use. For phishing detection, the operation that takes place on each pixel is the counting of its basic colors.
Wow.
Yeah. This was all news to me.
Did they explain why they're monitoring the colors? I'm sure there's some correlation, but it's not obvious.
So they say, yeah, kind of. The colors are stored in an associative data structure called a hash map. For each pixel, we extract its RGB color values and store the counts in one of 3 different hash maps. So I guess they break it down into RGB, and then they're like storing a histogram of the individual intensities of each R, G, and B component.
Yeah, they probably hash it for speed, right?
And then hashing, right. And they said 1 for each color. Adding one item to a hash map is fast, but we have to do this for millions of pixels. We try to avoid reducing the number of pixels to avoid compromising the quality of the analysis. However, the computation itself can be improved, and in this just released 92, it has been. The code now avoids keeping track of RGB channels in 3 different hash maps and instead uses only 1 to index by color. 3 times less counting, they said. And this, I think, is the big key. Consecutive pixels are summed before being counted in the hash map.
It's kind of like Huffman encoding. It's like
yeah, right.
Yeah.
For a site with a uniform background color, that's the reason I said, well, they actually are paying attention to background colors. They said this can reduce the hash map overhead to almost nothing. With, like, in the same way as you said, Huffman would compress a long run of something down to something very short. With the new approach, there are significantly fewer operations on the hash map. As a result, starting with 92, Chrome now executes image-based phishing classification. Okay, so the big takeaway is that phishing is using image-based classification. Like, okay, who knew that? Up to 50 times faster at the 50th percentile. Okay, so that means what? That half of the users get 50 times improvement. There are then on one side of that, the 50th percentile, they're getting even better improvement. And on the other side, they're getting less dramatic improvement. But they did say, and 2.5 times faster at the 99th percentile. So, even 99% of all users will get up to at least 2.5 times faster. On average, they said, users will get their phishing classification results after 100 milliseconds instead of 1.8 seconds. They said this benefits you in 2 ways as you use Chrome. First and foremost, using less CPU time to achieve the same work improves general performance. Less CPU time means less battery drain and less time with spinning fans. Second, getting the results faster means Chrome can warn you sooner. The optimization brought the percentage of requests that took more than 5 seconds to process from 16.25% to less than 1.6%. So 16.5% we're actually requiring more than 5.5 seconds for Chrome to decide if this was a phishing page you were being shown. So this client-side phishing detection is very time and has been very time and compute intensive. And they said, and the speed improvement makes a real difference in security, especially when it comes to stopping you from entering your password in a phishing site. Yeah, 5 seconds. And so if you've got any kind of automated username and password insertion going on, you may have already done that. It will have filled in the form, and you've clicked log me in before 5 seconds have passed, and then it turns out to be a malignant, malicious site. So, yeah, you don't want to wait. I mean, you want to know a lot faster than that. They said overall, these changes achieve a reduction of almost 1.2% of the total CPU time used by all Chrome renderer processes and utility processes. At Chrome's scale, even minor algorithm improvements can result in major energy efficiency gains in aggregate. Here's to many, many more centuries of CPU time saved. Stay tuned for many more performance improvements to come. So what they must have done is, done some performance profiling of Chrome and looked at like where all the time was going, and a chunk of it was going to looking at every single page the user visits. And, is it valid? And so what they must also mean, this also means that in every end user's Chrome repository on their local machine are a set of criteria that, like, phishing sites they have seen and profiled. So they've done this wacky image distillation and basically reduced the image to a hash, and they've stored all these hashes, Lord knows how many, on our hard drives. And when you go to a page, Chrome performs this process and checks to see if there's a match with any known phishing images, and if so, warns you.
It's essentially fingerprinting the site, but it's doing so by its use of color. And I bet you where this came from is you have a similar problem if you're trying to detect porn. And so all of the companies, Facebook, Google, anybody who's got image storage, has an algorithm that seems, or especially not just porn in general, but revenge porn, where they have hashes of known revenge porn images, and then they look for
any future occurrence.
If it matches, we got another one, and they pull it down immediately. And I suspect, and they also, I think there were attempts to do this with just too much flesh at one point, which, by the way, were not very effective. But that's probably where the body of knowledge comes from.
So it used to be heuristic. So if it was a lot of flesh tone,
a lot of flesh tones, that didn't work so well. I remember they stopped doing that. But I suspect that the research done is probably related to this. So what's interesting is the choice and use of colors in a site are unique enough that you can say it's a fingerprint, essentially.
Yep.
And
interesting. The other nice thing about this is when you think about it, because we're all twitchy now about fingerprinting, right? So this is something that absolutely destroys the image. Like, you're not in any way storing a representation of an image that could be sensitive. It's a hash of some deconstruction of the individual RGB values, which are counted in some fashion, and just so I mean, it's really and the fact that they're using a hash means that it can't be reversed, right? So
that was the image with revenge porn. You don't want to circulate those images.
Right.
That would be counterproductive.
And as we know, anytime you pump something through a hash, that's an information lossy process, in this case, on purpose. So they've come up with something which is certainly not inexpensive to do, and it's like, wow, Didn't realize that was happening in the background. But, and I've had that big, I'm sure we've all, Chrome users, the whole screen goes red. And it's like, warning Will Robinson. It's like, whoa, what happened? There it is. Yep, there's a perfect example of it that you just brought up.
Deceptive sight ahead.
Right.
I just think this is a very kind of computer science-y solution, because the problem is, well, how do you, we've got known phishing sites. How do you fingerprint those and identify them in a speedy way in future? Yep. And I love it that they said, if we just look at the colors, that's enough. Yeah. I think that's great. And we can hash those very quickly.
And so the takeaway is probably do not put too many pictures of pumpkins on your...
Stay away from the pumpkins.
That might cause a false positive. Because pumpkins could be misconstrued.
You never know. You never know.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was Security Now 829 Chrome phishing detection. So yeah, this is interesting. I didn't know this was going on. I guess I've been lucky. I don't go to the sites where I get the big red screen saying, "Oh, you're being phished." So it's good that they're doing that. I guess the obvious question is, well, if the whole idea is just to avoid certain sites and just make a list of those sites. Well, a lot of times the URLs change around and the underlying site stays the same, especially on these kind of criminal enterprise ones. So this was interesting, though. I'm sure this is again kind of a case of don't be the low-hanging fruit, because if everyone was really tuned into this, I don't know. It's like Google is doing it, though. That's really strange. I would expect that anyone whose site was detected by this would then say, "Oh, I'm going to change my colors so that Google won't detect me." I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. It's probably just one input of many, and it's generally kind of a losing game to try to get into a competition with Google on things. So it could be that they just like, well, fine, we're expecting a lot of people will be still using, like Microsoft Explorer or Internet Explorer or something to browse the web, the ones that are the best candidates for phishing attacks anyway. So maybe they don't care what Chrome is doing, or at least not enough to do anything about it. Now, on the side why Google cares, that that delay, that multi-second delay, Google makes money when the more you use the internet, because so many people are using Google advertising. So it becomes very relevant that delay will cost them money when you realize that a study showed kind of a curve of how long people would wait until they canceled a page load, what they call page abandonment. It's like, especially if you're following a link from like a Reddit link or something like that, where it's like, oh, okay, here's this thing that's on the front page of Reddit or some other method of making something otherwise obscure very popular. All of a sudden you click on the link and nothing happens, because 25 million times the normal amount of visitors are trying to access the page. And so you go, okay, well, I guess it's not loading, and you let it be. So they did studies on how fast people were to abandon, and it goes up really quick, but at a 4-second delay, there's a 25% page abandonment. So, that's when it really starts to get significant. So this is huge for Google to reduce this, this page load time from a couple of sides. One is you're using the internet more, you're going to be less likely to abandon pages. And the other is you're not going to associate Chrome with being slow, which might be enough to make you change to a different browser. And then Chrome loses that foothold on your system and influence in the marketplace with saying, like, hey, the more people use Chrome, the more Google gets to define how the web works. They make a change and everyone else has to match that change or become irrelevant as people build to their standards. It's what Microsoft, at least part of the old Microsoft cycle of embrace, extend, and extinguish, which was their way of getting rid of competitors, they'd enter a space where someone was already dominant. They'd make their clone, and then they'd start adding, extra features to their version that the original leader in the market wouldn't understand. And it's like, oh, okay, well, you can do Microsoft, which understands everything, or you can use the original person that only the original application only understands a subset of that. And it's like, okay, that's how they would take over something. And then oftentimes then they just drop the product, and it's like, okay, we just didn't want that to exist. So we outcompeted it because we have more engineers, and we can, change things faster and in more devious ways than the other guy. And then, boom, they're gone. So there's that issue. So there's a value in having your browser on someone's desktop. In fact, we've talked before about how the browser has, as the major way that we're interacting with the world, has in a lot of ways become the operating system. It's like there's so many web apps as well as web pages that, rely on whatever particular browser they're using to, for their functionality. So that essentially becomes your operating system. That's why they're so darned sophisticated. I want to say complicated. And with that complication comes vulnerability, because that's also the major way you get, malware finds its way onto your system is through your browser. So, because it's just too sophisticated. The more interpreting that it does, most atrociously when Flash was a thing, it's just notoriously easy to make malicious Flash applications. And so they got, with some leadership from Apple, they just basically got rid of that. Apple just said, okay, we're not supporting Flash anymore. And, pretty soon Flash was dead. And even Adobe was saying, okay, we're sunsetting Flash. It's gone. We're not going to support it anymore. We're tired of, issuing huge updates every few minutes because someone found yet another flaw in it. But the browsers have no shortage of their own flaws. I thought it was kind of interesting. They mentioned Huffman encoding, part of how they compressed things down, and just Huffman encoding was kind of it was a really kind of an aha moment, when I first learned about it, because it was simply taking the idea of, instead of using a fixed number of bits to represent a whole alphabet, like say, you have 8 bits, 128 values, and that's what you're going to encode all your text into. Huffman encoding is the idea that you make a tree that represents like a binary tree. So you have a parent node, and then that has 2 subnodes representing, if you go to the left child, that's 0, and you go to the right child, that's 1. And you make a tree with the nodes indicated different characters in a particular message. And you put higher up on the tree, i.e. shorter codes, for the characters that are most common, and you go farther down the tree for the longer codes to represent the most uncommon characters. So I was just looking at an example where they're talking about, if you had the message, go, gopher. All right, so G and O occur the most. So they're fairly high up in the tree, and their character representations would be 1, 0, and 1, 1, respectively. So they take 2 bits each. And then that first one is just, okay, we're going down the right side of the tree, and then we're going to the left, 0 for G, and going to the right, O for 1 for the O and gopher. And 0 goes to the longer encodings. So maybe the P would be 0, 1, 0, 0, and then H would be 0, 1, 0, 1, and then so on. Now, the one downside is that you do have to transmit the tree at some point. So, it's not strictly just the length of the code. So for short messages, Huffman encoding doesn't make a lot of sense. But for long messages with lots of repetitious sequences and a very strong bias towards certain characters, or a bias against certain characters, it really can make a remarkable amount of compression right there. That is sort of the start of what they call lossless compression, was something like that. And I kind of missed defining a key term there, phishing. What is phishing? Usually that is a malicious attack, a malware attack directed against an individual. So, maybe they send you an email with a link to a malicious site, and you go to that site, and then that site infects you through, again, the overly complicated and vulnerable browser. It's sort of, it's phishing with a PH instead of an F, but it's the same thing. It's just like, yep, get your fishing rod, go out and go see if you can land yourself a big blowfish sucker. Yeah. All right. Well, enough of that. Let's move on to another clip from the good folks at twit.tv. This is a Creative Commons clip from This Week in Tech 833 FCC and Right to Repair on twit.tv.
This is Twit.
The FTC votes unanimously to enforce right to repair, and I started celebrating. Woohoo! Yaha! The move follows an executive order issued last week by the White House, urging the agency to secure consumers' rights to fix their own gadgets. But then as I continue to read, I found out the FTC really doesn't have a lot to do with any of this. It's nice. It's good. It's great that the government is behind this, even though Apple, John Deere, and others have been fighting it state by state. The FTC issued a lengthy report last May that blasted manufacturers for restricting repairs. They voted 5-0 to enforce the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. Of course, the new chair at the FCC is one of those people President Biden appointed that is really anxious to prosecute big tech.
But they did point out in the statement that they've only taken one action on this in the last decade, and that was someone who was auto-enrolling people for extended warranties. There's a big hill to climb between that and Apple, suing third-party repair shops and the rest of it. The repair absolutely needs to be done, but the FTC statement was a bit weak sauce, I thought.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have lobbyists that lobby for your right, because Apple puts on this huge front about we care about the economy. That's why we're not giving you headphones anymore. The package is slimmer. We're wasting less cardboard. Ridiculous. But you won't allow people, one, to make a living in a business, two, to recycle your phones and keep them alive longer, still keeping it in an ecosystem. It's not like they take iPhones and turn them into Androids. They're prolonging your product. But Apple's real device thing is, drop it on the ground, break it with my Gorilla Glass, go buy a new one tomorrow. And only we can refurbish it, and we really don't even sell the refurbs to people. We pack them up and send them overseas when we get bundles of them. So it's such a scam because that company specifically acts like they care about reusing and renewal and the environment and all that stuff, but they don't. They just don't.
And companies...
Apple invented entire new screw heads just to...
Yeah, Steve Jobs didn't want anybody to get into the original Mac, so he created the Torx screw, thinking nobody would be able to get into it. Of course, he underestimated the hacker mentality.
Yeah,
and you can it's easy to get a Torx screwdriver these days, or a pentalobe, or whatever they're using. Kyle Wiens, testifying in front of the Productivity Commission this week, brought up some really strong examples. He says, we've seen manufacturers restrict... Kyle Wiens is the CEO of iFixit, I should mention, one-time sponsor, actually off-time sponsor on our shows. But I love iFixit. I've actually purchased their Fix-It kits. I bought a battery kit for my iPhone, my Pixel X4 XL, which was battery had swollen. $39, had a replacement battery, all the tools, took it apart, put in a new battery. It worked. I'm like, wow, I'm pretty handy. But
no, I mean, you gave me an iFixit toolkit for Christmas.
Yes, a couple of years ago we gave all the hosts that. Yeah,
exactly. That saved my bacon a couple of months ago.
He says
my ThinkPad was showing up a non-detective battery, and it was like, do I send my main computer into IBM for 2 weeks, or do I take the back off it, reset the battery, and see how that works? So of course we need to repair this stuff.
Yeah. And I think Kyle's even fairly conservative. He's not even saying, because his company basically sells parts, manuals, and tools. That's their business, so that you can fix your own stuff. He says, look, if something's gone out of warranty, we should at least be able to buy the parts to fix that, right? Mm-hmm. He says, we've seen manufacturers, this is a quote, restrict our ability to buy parts. There's a German manufacturer of batteries called Varta. They sell batteries to a wide variety of companies. Samsung happens to use these batteries in their Galaxy earbuds, but when we go to Varta and say, we want to buy that battery as a repair part, they say, no, our contract with Samsung will not allow us to sell that. He says, Apple is notorious for doing this with chips in their computers. There's a particular charging chip on the MacBook Pro. There's a standard version of the part, and then there's the, quote, Apple version of the part that sits very slightly tweaked, but it's tweaked enough that it's only required to work in this computer. And that company is, again, under contractual requirement with Apple. It gets even worse. There was a company in California, a California-based recycler, that Apple required to recycle spare parts that were still in new condition. This is the quote, California Apple stops providing service after 7 years. So this was at 7 years, and Apple has warehouses full of spare parts, never used, brand new, rather than selling them out on the marketplace. So like someone like me, says Kyle, who eagerly would have bought them, they were paying the recycler to destroy them. Now, Apple can say, oh, it's for safety, it's for quality, but if something's out of warranty because it's 7 years old, and you have lots of old parts that you're never going to use, why wouldn't you sell them to iFix so they can sell them on to customers to fix their stuff? I don't understand it.
Well, and you're going to have to buy more. It just fits to their bottom line, right?
Yeah, because you need to buy a new phone. You've got this phone for 7 years. Exactly. What are you, nuts? Get a new phone.
Exactly.
You hate America?
What I love, though, is that the way that things change is that if the culture starts to shift towards that we believe we have the right to fix things,
yes,
then the government will slowly shift because they want to be able to be reelected to we're going to make sure that people can fix things. Again, if they can make money and they can do this as slowly as possible through lobbying, they completely will. And that's why lobbying really should not be allowed, especially with the amounts of money that they're able to donate. But we are starting to say, you know what, this is mine, I own it. Why would you stop me from being able to open it up and not be able to repair it? It's ridiculous. And that wastefulness, it's starting to become distasteful. Before it was just throw everything out and get something new. And now we're like, oh, wait, it doesn't just disappear into nowhere. It actually ends up somewhere that we're going to have to deal with it again. Like we're stuck on this lump of rock floating through space. It's the only lump of rock that we know of that we can take care of. Maybe we should take better care of it.
Also, I got a flat tire. Yeah, I'm just going to throw this away. Can I get a new car delivered to the house tomorrow?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure somebody can fix it, but there's a wheel lock on it. I don't have the key for the wheel lock. Oh, sorry, I'm on it. Oh, hey guys. So yeah, I mean, let's. And also, by the way, I got popcorn for the holidays. I did not get a toolkit. I mean, what
that was a couple of years ago. We sent you popcorn. Did we really send you popcorn?
Yeah, I got like it was good popcorn too. It was like one of those assorted with all fancy stuff. I got assorted chocolates one year. I get, you guys always hook me up with something nice, but it's
that's Lisa.
Because I'm big, Uncle Leo.
That's Lisa.
Lisa, is that what it is? You always send me these sweet treats.
Lisa will come to me and say, just so you know, when Owen's on, we bought him popcorn, just so you know. Oh, thanks. It's good to know.
Oh, it was good stuff. It was good stuff.
Good. Thank her for buying fancy popcorn. Next time we'll send you a toolkit. That was like 4 or 5 years ago, I think, Ian, right? The toolkit.
It was a while back, but I got to say it's proved itself many times.
Oh, I love that.
And at occasion, because you know what it's like when you know a bit about technology. You're tech support for all your friends. But
we
when
bought
you
like
put that thing down on the table and open it up, it's just like, this guy's serious.
We bought like 5 or 6 for the house because they keep going missing. And actually now I have a pair. It's hidden. I have a set hidden because I know that somebody will come and get it and use it and not put it back. So it's actually, don't tell anybody, but if you're ever at our house, there's an iFixit toolkit slid behind my printer in my office. If you ever need it.
You know what's funny? I keep an Allen key set hidden like that because, you know, when you're working on somebody needs to ask, oh, can I use that? And then I have like
never
3
see
of
it
them
again.
that are missing. So I have an Allen key set that is hidden away where I don't If somebody needs it, I bring it to you. I stand there and watch you do it. I take it back because otherwise it'll be lumped up with the other ones that are missing.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Tech 833, talking about the right to repair. And so a lot of things got into the Warranty Act, and which, as they said, had only been enforced once in the last decade for auto-enrolling people in extended warranties. Kind of the ultimate click wrap license where you don't even know what you're agreeing to. It just like does it for you. Or maybe like Wells Fargo when they were just like signing people up for accounts without their knowledge or permission. Every once in a while, when there is low enforcement, then bad actors will just creep out further and further and further and further until someone slaps their hand. And, if it's a light slap, then they're just like, okay. And they just start creeping off and creeping off. It just, they start the process all over again. Because when the penalty is less than the amount of money you make from doing a bad action, then it just simply becomes a cost of doing business and not an actual deterrent. Just, look contrite and then do it again as soon as no one's looking. People are kind of pushing back. There's been this increasing creeping treatment of everything we buy as something we're leasing instead of buying, where the producer continues to exercise control over it in various ways. Sometimes it's very direct, such as, on, like, say, the Kindle, when they reach into your Kindle and delete a book because someone came and told them they didn't like, someone was threatening to sue them if they didn't take down something. It's like, okay, not only will we take down the book from our library of offerings, we will reach into individual people's libraries and delete that. Like, be like walking into your house and, taking a book off your shelf and then, leaving, whatever you purchased it for. It's like, oh yeah, we'll leave you, $4.95 or whatever it was, and just take this book back. And, and that's not always, that doesn't even, aside from just the autonomy of, please, what's going on? What sort of, dignity and self-respect do I have when someone is in a position to simply just come in and take my stuff without any sort of notice or due process? It's no longer a society of equals when one party can do that to another party and there's really no recourse. But beyond that, it's not even necessarily financially equitable to say, well, we're just going to unilaterally give you a refund on this thing that you purchased. It may have greater value to you than that. It may have, maybe that's something that's gone out of print and it's, it's more valuable in a commercial sense. Maybe, you've written notes in the margins that were personally valuable to you. Maybe it was, something that you were discussing with a friend or whatever. In the Kindle case, there was, several things where, okay, this is a book that was used in a class and someone was using the annotation feature to where you can make notes on certain passages in books that are, ebooks in Kindle. And when they took the book, they took all the notes. It's like, okay, that was my own creativity. It was nowhere else, and you intentionally took it. That's a different thing than, okay, I didn't have it backed up and, it just something died. That's one thing. But someone made a decision to come and take your stuff. They should be liable for all the implications of that. And so people have been pushing back, as these more extreme versions of treating nothing as being, purchased and completely owned by the end user. And as they push back, the politicians start to make noises of oh yeah, we're on your side. And meanwhile, just dragging their feet as much as possible to the inevitable. So, the bad actors can continue to make as much money as possible in the meantime. And, so everyone, as they say, everyone's happy. That matters. A great example from and they're throwing away a car because of a flat tire and, custom wheel locks that wouldn't let you change the tires yourself. Yeah. All right. Well, that is the world we're living in. And, as we like to say, just a better knowledge of it can hopefully give you some better results. Oh, and right to repair, a lot of background to go into that. We've had some, we've had like an executive order directing the different agencies to, favor right to repair. All right. Well, since each agency is somewhat independent, not supposed to generally just like take direct orders. Different opinions on that, of course. Under different administrations, that works differently. But theoretically, you could say, well, fine. If you want me to do something else, you can replace me as the head of this agency. But while I'm here, I'm going to do what I think is best for, my agency and or the person who sponsored me there in different circumstances. But the right to repair movement is just kind of forming together to under a lot of different hats, a lot of different cases to say, this is a general concern. We might have a lot of bias towards the electronic stuff. We want to be able to repair our iPhones and such like that. But there's also farmers want to repair their tractors, not just for cost savings, but for speed. They need to bring in the harvest. They can't wait 2 weeks for a repairman to come out. And oddly enough, a lot of the developments in farm technology came from farmers. They were notorious makers and modifiers of their gear. And, the companies would say, oh, yeah, good idea. We'll integrate those ideas into our products, which was fine with the farmers because they weren't in the, intellectual property business. They were just wanting to, do their farming and efficiently and, with reliability and low cost. And if someone wants to sell them a tool pre-modified in the way they were modifying it themselves, well, all the better. But then along comes this kind of philosophy of, well, yeah, you bought it, but really we're going to act like we own it, and tractors became a computer that you ride around in. It's doing, soil samples and moisture checking and all this stuff, and it's reporting it back to headquarters. It's saying, okay, I know my GPS location. I know what, how the soil is doing and all this, and we'll be perfectly willing to sell you back the data that we collected from you in kind of, a polished up form. And it's like, oh, okay, well, you didn't really buy that data from me, but fine, I can use it. It's valuable to me, so I'll pay because I have no choice. But it gets a little more troubling when they say, oh, well, this heat sensor has gone bad, and so it's indicating that the system is overheated when it isn't, and the whole thing won't run until that sensor is replaced, and you can't replace it yourself. And that's a problem. That's a problem. They've held your whole system hostage, and they've even gone so far as to say, well, to twist other laws to protect their monopoly on this, saying, well, this is we have a protection system there because you might, you might steal our source code or something if we didn't protect our system. And it's like, we don't want your freaking source code. We just want to be able to get our tractor to run. But, under certain laws, they were able to say, okay, well, this is it's a felony to, provide any tools that help someone decode this stuff so they can fix their own stuff for these unrelated reasons of, intellectual property. So that is, there's more and more pressure from the right to repair people. And it's nice that kind of like, a lot of people came together, like people that were trying to save trees, and you had people trying to save this owl and, and this wetland or whatever. And they all came together under the ecology movement. In a similar way, a lot of people with all these very, widely separated demographics, but they're all kind of coming together under the pennant of right to repair. Thought of, hey, when you buy something, you should be able to fix it and to discourage or hopefully make illegal the practice of going out of your way to make things harder to repair, throwing obstacles in your way, and just being required to make it easier. Like in the automotive industry, there was a lot of critical signaling stuff going around on what was called the CAN bus. And there was some legislation saying, okay, you have to allow repair shops access to tools that will access this CAN bus. And they said, oh, okay, fine. We're going to move all that critical information to a wireless network that is not covered. It's explicitly it's saying the CAN bus. And so we're just going to move stuff off the CAN bus and do exactly the same thing a different way. And all of a sudden now it's, they can throw up obstacles again. So, really a lot of twisting of the letter of the law to, basically set up a system where it's like, well, when we have made our business model that, we're going to sell you these parts for repair and we're going to do these services, and when we decide something is no longer supported, you're not going to be able to fix your old stuff, and you're going to be you'll be forced to buy the new stuff, and that's our business model. And through these laws, we're essentially making contempt of business model illegal, of trying to get around buying new products when the old stuff should still work. We're going to just, make it impossible to do that legally or practically. So this is what we've been dealing with. Now, under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which some of these guys were hiding behind, like I was saying, with the idea that they can lock you out of the inner workings of the tractor so you don't steal their source code, or you don't, like they can make a player that won't let you steal music. And that's not the point at all. But okay, you put some access protection controls on something, and no matter how weak the actual security method is, like, oh, we're just going to take all the zeros and terms and ones and all the ones in terms of zeros. Now it's encoded, and now it's protected by the DMCA, and it's a felony to mess with it. It's like, oh, okay. The Librarian of Congress was a part of that DMCA code, saying the Librarian of Congress can make exemptions every 3 years. And so maybe 1 year the librarian would say, oh, okay, there's a lot of problems with people not being able to take their cell phone from one that they've owned, from one cell carrier to another. And so we're going to make unlocking your cell phone legal. But that exemption only lasts until the next time they do new exemptions, and maybe they're saying, oh, well, there's lots of competition in this market now, so we're not going to do that anymore. And, all of a sudden, it's like that competition only existed because you had that exemption. And so you just put everybody out of business that you put in business 3 years ago. And yeah, you get that kind of thing. Sort of like when they said, well, we don't need to do voting rights stuff because there's not, very much voter suppression. And, of course, voter suppression comes roaring back as soon as you take away the laws against it. A lot of times there's just these forces that are out there waiting for the regulation to recede. And not that regulation is a result for everything, but, for the free marketplace to have a chance to work, you can't let the big parties put their thumb on the scales. You have to actually allow competition to happen for competition to be a cure for anything. So, yeah, right to repair, it's in vogue. Okay, it's, there are enough people pushing for it that the politicians have started to go, oh, yeah, we're for right to repair. Yeah. Sorry, guys. As they say to the guys sticking cash in their pockets, it's like, we're just going to, we're going to slow roll this right to repair thing. But, that's kind of what we got to do. And everyone understands the game. But, so in the meantime, get old stuff that's before they make upgrades that sometimes the older stuff is better. It doesn't have a lot of extraneous stuff that was added pretty much for the purpose for being able to enforce planned obsolescence. It's like a lot of times an older washing machine is better than a newer washing machine before they put in a lot of electronics that are problematic to fix if the manufacturer doesn't support that effort. You just get something rock solid and, it's like, oh, this motor gives out. You swap in another motor and you keep rolling. You don't need to, get permission from the, the encryption chip or something for the repair to work. Just like that. And make your own stuff, of course. I'm a big fan of the maker movement, taking parts and putting them together and making your own version of things. I was just looking yesterday at a, kind of a 3D display thing. And in the comments for the story, it's like, yeah, here's the DIY version of this 3D display where, you get this software and you get this, that plastic, I want to say lenticular sheet of just all these fine lines that if you're at a slightly different angle, it's like if you had odd and even vertical lines going across a page. When you're at one angle, you see all the even lines, and when you're at the other angle, you see all the odd lines. And essentially, okay, so you just slice up a picture so that the left-hand lines or the zero lines or whatever make up one picture, and the right-hand lines or the one lines make up a different picture, and now your left and right eye are seeing different pictures, and boom, you've got, a kind of 3D. And, you could do that with a display, with a computer display. You put this lens over it and you calibrate your software so it understands, okay, the left eye is going to see this sheet and the right eye is going to see that sheet, and let's slice up input to it to make 3D images. And it was just kind of laid out, okay, here's how you make the physical part of it from parts, and here's the software that will let you calibrate it, and boom, you've got your own 3D display. It's not trivial to do, but it's there, and you can, if you make it from scratch, you can fix it if it has any problems. Sometimes that's worth the extra effort. There's so many things that's like, well, this is really great, but I have to be careful about updating it because someday the update may brick it, like happened with the Sonos speakers. They said, okay, we're bricking the system. I think they did that with the, they gave incentive to people saying, well, if you let us brick your speakers, then we'll give you a discount on buying a new one. But it's still a pretty ugly act on the base level of, let's destroy perfectly functional technology in the furtherance of our business model. So, as people become aware of this stuff and push back, hey, the environment changes. Nothing was changed by people that were too discouraged to ask. So, yes, you can ask, you can look around, you can do it yourself, make your own alternatives or modifications to existing products. And all these are signals, to the system of, hey, you want to keep making money, you have to give me what I actually want. So being educated in what you want can give you better results. And with that, you've done it again. Spent an hour talking about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you get better results at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. I hope you'll join us to continue these conversations next Wednesday and every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock, for Northwest Tech Show.